Thank you and a very warm welcome. Uh, it's been a wonderful day so far, and I, as a member of Editors Guild of India, have been particularly very interested in this particular subject, reporting from beyond the uh, metros, because I spent 25 years of my life as a state reporter, working out of cities and towns, not the big ones. And my personal sympathies squarely lie with the state reporters. I still, in my mind, I'm a state reporter, who I think have been victims of essentially 3 Ps: poor pay, poor protection, and also they are victims of local power play. And one may also add to these 3 Ps the general indifference of possibly the mainstream media and the big newspapers and the big editors who generally operate out of big cities. For them, the local reporters who are working day in and day out in the interiors, they really don't matter. So I'm extremely glad to be moderating this session with some very experienced journalists, and I would like to pick their brains. And we have, very interestingly, I was actually very thrilled when I found that someone from Arunachal Pradesh will be in this panel. When was the last time that you read a story about Arunachal Pradesh? So Amar, welcome. There is a media in Arunachal, right? Okay. So how many newspapers and how many working journalists in your state? 9 newspapers. English?
9 English.
Okay, wonderful.
Take the mic.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me here, especially it Guilds of India. It was unexpected invitation from EGI. Like many of you may not heard a lot about my state. My state is largest state in terms of geography, but we have a less in number in terms of population. So like Ruben sir said, how many is there a media in Arunachal? Of course we have media in Arunachal. First newspaper, the Echo of Arunachal, started way back in 1988, followed by the organization I'm working with, Arunachal Times, started way back in 1989. And media scenario in Arunachal is I think being associated with Indian Journalists Unions. I'm president of Arunachal Pradesh Union Working Journalists out there, and I think compared to mainstream media, so-called mainstream media, I think we are more vocal than the mainstream media is out there in my state. Though we are small in number, but we are. I would proudly say we are more vocal than mainstream media. The issue we raise, the issue we ride upon is quite formidable and appreciable.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. But why do you think that Arunachal as a state gets so little representation or space in the media that we know, the rest of the country?
This may be sound offending to many of our media colleagues based in Delhi and Guwahati. When it comes to my state, especially Arunachal Pradesh, only Online news and China news, only the national news, other than
unless the chief minister commits suicide.
Yeah, unless the chief minister committed suicide and chief minister's helicopter goes missing, that only makes a news for the national dailies and national news channel. But apart from that, we have a lot of news out there. If you from tourism point of view, if you go to Arunachal, I would say my state would be the best adventurous destinations in India, but it's still remain unexplored. So we need national media attention to highlight the issue we've been facing.
So I get your point. So there is essentially a tyranny of distance that we talk about. Like Arunachal is so far away, it gets very little space. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be the case. Sneashish, you have had a very rich experience, and you are a television journalist, a very prominent face in 80s and 90s and even now. Do you think that journalists who work in not the non-metros, they have a rough time
Yes, definitely. Just before answering, I must thank the EGI for holding such a conclave and opening it up to the media associations and the press clubs. So we take this opportunity to learn and to get to know the serious issues. Now, coming to your point, yes, uh, we have been discussing the problems faced by the journalists and media. Yes, the problems are more as long as you go towards the grassroots, like the media in the national headquarters, then the state headquarters, and then you go to what we call the districts and subdivisional headquarters. There are some specific problems. Number one is the recognition of the district level headquarters by the mainstream media, by the state media, even by the public service broadcaster, because public service broadcaster, so-called All India Radio and Doordarshan, recognize the correspondent, the district correspondent, which they are known as part-time correspondent, PTCs. But what happens to the videographer who actually takes photographs for them? So there is no recognition, and they have to suffer tremendously. And so this is one question of recognition and identity. The second question of, the appointment letter. Hardly there is any such. By when we talk about media, we criticize others, but when it comes to us, and we all know what it is. And then the security point of view, it's social security, like medical and all others. They have to go to travel overnight, they have to go to the distant places if something happens, and the local goons and other problems are there, and the social security like mediclaim and these coverages. And the problems created by the police always is there, and it has started increasing in numbers, and the threats given by the criminals. So, and we know that their compensation actually, the salary or whatever it is, sometimes it's piecemeal by the story wise, or even there is not much of a retainer fee, and so the limited salary makes you to do something else. Now, the something else is quote unquote, whether you become a part-time teacher or not, or the other things. So, and the digital media is coming, and anybody and everybody is coming in the media. It's so easy. Digitization is democratized, but it's some kind of an exploitation. So this is going on.
Great points, and this is something which I have always felt when I was reporting from the states, various states. I always felt that there are some fantastic, very good journalists in the states beyond the metros, but they somehow, unfortunately, they don't get the acknowledgement or the recognition that they deserve. It's mostly Delhi and metros where, perhaps because of the proximity to the television channels, they hog all the limelight, and that has been one my constant grouch. Sugata, you have been a journalist, you have been an editor, Vijay Times, one of the most circulated Karandikar dailies. Do you think that, see, the basic point that as I see it, it's only 10% of Indians speak English. And so, which also means that majorly a big chunk of journalism is being done by the regional papers and the regional journalists. But say, for example, in Karnataka, do you think they get the acknowledgement, the reporters?
That's a very good question, Ruben. Thank you for having me here. I've worked in both the worlds. I've been an English journalist and I've been an editor in some of the behemoth language dailies. So I think I have a bit of standing to speak on both the worlds. See, even what we have observed since morning here, there is a disproportionate influence that Anglophone journalists command. So they set the agenda, they do the propaganda, propagate certain ideas. They sort of hold on to the bigger issues, including freedom of press and all that. But when you go to the hinterlands, or when you go to the non-metros, the issues are very different. I was listening to the previous session, and I just asked myself, what are the 4 questions that we need to ask if we need to understand what those people are going through? So, I'm speaking for language journalists here. When I say Anglophone journalists control disproportionate influence, I'm speaking about 99% of Indian journalism. And a lot of questions were raised in the previous session. For example, who trains them? There are no training schools. Nobody trains them. They learn on the job. There is a question of how much are they paid. I think Sneha has raised that very interesting issue. Let me tell you this. I was the editor of Outlook in the South, and I just took over a newspaper that the Times of India had bought from a truck company. It was a huge paper. They said, why don't you come? And, they were trying to entice me into it. They had paid a lot of money to buy it. And they said it's a #1 paper in Karnataka. This is Vijay Karnataka. It had been bought over. And they said, why don't you modernize it? So and one of the briefs that was told to me was, see, pan and gutka advertisements come on page 1. We should be able to see Audi and Maruti and stuff like that on page 1 so that we make money. So, as an English journalist, who had worked in Hindustan Times, Irish Times, Outlook and all that, I found that to be an interesting task. And when I went there, on day 2, what I discovered was absolutely shocking. I just looked at the roles and I asked for the pay structure. You know what they would do with stringers and retainers, the earlier company? They would just give them an ID card and they would say, this is your salary. You earn your money through this ID card. But itna story aana chahiye by evening. And there's no fixed retainership as well. So then that, created a certain kind of vicious circle of caste patronage or political patronage. And, regional editions of the newspaper would print birthday advertisements of, say, Jilla Panchayat members. And that is how money was collected. And there was no standard advertising rate as well. I'm telling you this.
I agree with you.
Right?
Sugata.
So this is question number 1. And then who trains is the other one. And how big is their universe? We've already addressed that question. In fact, after this paper, I went on to, lead a group which had many television channels, regional television channels, the Asianet group. And there, the first time the BARC ratings came, I was surprised. We were only obsessed talking about Arnab Goswami, but his universe was minuscule, absolutely small. The BARC rating showed that the regional channels had a huge universe, while the English channels had just 1% or 1.5%. And why? And we were obsessed discussing Arnab Goswami as if he was the national agenda. So things like these, and the other thing is, how are these people perceived? The last question that I thought, how are they perceived? The Anglophone journalists, including me, people like us, we look at them as informers. They have the most valuable information. They are the ones who are attached to the soil and they know what is happening. So we only treat them as informers. People fly in helicopter thing from Delhi to, say, Bangalore or Dharwad or say Jharkhand or somewhere else, and they start asking them questions and they get the best stories. They don't even have the ethical thing to acknowledge them. They write big stories for big publications and get away with it. And today I can tell you, I end by saying that in Karnataka, there's one man organization, and that man was responsible for the Yediyurappa government to go, the Bommai government to go, and today he has put the Siddaramaiah government in the dock. Even things like how political patronage has been dispensed in the Siddaramaiah regime. Even the fact-checking unit.
Who is this gentleman, by the way?
His name is Mahantesh. He runs an investigative site called The File, which has been funded by IPSFM recently, right? And he broke a story recently about the fact-checking unit where Siddaramaiah was giving money to all his cronies who had done campaign for the assembly election. So this is the kind of situation that exists of 99% of the media in India, and we are bothered about talking what sort of, there's a bubble, absolute bubble.
You are absolutely right, and that I believe has been the tragedy with Indian media. And because my sympathies and my background lies with state reporting, so possibly I have a slightly better clue about what's happening. I think Indian media, when we talk about and we discuss and we have such conclaves, what we are essentially missing is that Indian media, by and large, 90% of it is unorganized sector. is these foot soldiers who are out in the hinterland, in the villages and towns, they never get the recognition, never get the acknowledgement. Possibly one reason is that they are so far away from the television studios, so they're never ever in the spotlight. Sumit, what's your take? How difficult is it for a journalist out there beyond the metros to function?
Jai Bhim to everybody. Thank you for this wonderful gathering and Anand inviting me. This is really a nice moment. Because I'm into community journalism and I'm primarily covering the caste issues in India, so I would like to give you a brief understanding about that how community media functions in the hinterland. See, the first question is with the community journalist is there that do we have the numbers of journalists in the community journalism area? Because the larger media of the India, the nation is controlled by some particular communities only, and they are busy with their own issues. They are covering their own things. They don't have that caste agenda in their like news reporting unless until there is something big happens, or like a murder is there, a rape is there, or some massacre is there, unless and until they never goes for a reporting for the caste issue. So the first question is, do we really have the community journalists in the hinterland areas? So nowadays, because the social media is like is very powerful and technology is becoming more democratized to the layman people of the country, so numbers of people from the community are using mobile phones for their journalism. So they are not trained, they are not getting professional training from any institute, they never worked with any media organization, they never been to any internship or somewhere like, but still they are covering, recording the caste atrocities in their areas and they are putting it on the social medias. So that become a challenge to us, that how to verify that particular information. If I am working in Delhi NCR and I'm reporting on particular area or particular story, it becomes a challenge to me that how to verify that particular story if it is coming from very hinterland area, because these stories are on the social media only, they become viral on social media, but the verification of that particular source of information become a challenge to the community journalist. And the people, those who are reporting, they are not very professional also, because they've never been to any media organization. So what kind of language they are using, what kind of information they are giving, that it also become a challenge to us to verify us. Still, to the community journalist, it is also very, very big challenge that can we afford to go that very particular area to report? Because if something happens to a guy in a 9-10 class student to Surana, that in Pali district of Rajasthan, because he was killed for touching a pot in his school. So like traveling from Delhi to Pali becomes around more than 500-600 kilometers to travel to report that particular story. That becomes a challenge to the community journalists, because we don't have that much fund, we don't have that much resources to spend that much money to travel for a single story, and that is not going to be monetized. Because in social media or the digital media algorithm, there is specification kind of caste discrimination within the algorithm also, I would say, because the terms like Dalits, the caste issues, the rapes, the murders, or the names of Dalit caste like Bhangi, Chamar, something like this there, that is always being demonetized on social media. That becomes a challenge to us, because they says that it is insensitive in nature and you cannot be monetized for this particular video. So that becomes a challenge to us, that how to survive if we are continuously reporting the caste issue. We cannot go too much to the site and do the ground reports from that area. That's also a challenge to us. Second thing, to the community journalist becomes a caste discrimination also, because the moment you tell them about your name, that you are Sahil Valmiki, you are Babita Jatav, that entire kind of mentality changes towards you. When you are reporting from that particular area, you're reporting to the victim's family, there is another kind of experience with that. But if you are going to the accused side of the story, once you tell about your name, that my name is Sumit Jatav, my name is Sumit Valmiki, that entire kind of conversation, that dialogue, that attitude, like it changes to you. So we are more vulnerable in that section also, and we faces caste discrimination also when we are doing the reporting in hinterland, the remote areas. That becomes a challenge to us. Second thing, we don't have that ecosystem also. There is nobody who can vouch for us, nobody is there who can protect us, nobody is there who can speak for us, or who can have that kind of ecosystem system. If I'm going to a area in Odisha, if I'm going to a area in Maharashtra, I don't have that contacts over there. I don't have that networking which other people from the privileged caste may have, because they are into that mainstream media, or I would say that monostream media. I call it monostream media because 90% of media is controlled by a few people, so they are responsible for it. So we faces that kind of issues in reporting to our community.
Very, very valid point, Sumit, and I fully empathize with you, because when I was a reporter and when I was reporting from a state like Orissa, I would end up writing mostly on starvation deaths or sale of children, and but these are the real issues, right? As caste discrimination, caste violence, atrocities, whatever. And with due respect to my editors, some of them have been very, very generous and benevolent to me. But then I always used to like, come on, ये story sexy नहीं है, ये बिकेगा नहीं. See, because the audience of mainstream media is people driving an Audi or a Mercedes or at least a Maruti. Right? He or she is not bothered about a child in, say, a district like Bolangir being sold for rupees 40 for a price of less than a plate of chicken. So that's a genuine issue. And state reporters, I always believe that reporters from hinterland have been left to the wolves. We will come to the pay packet or lack of pay, not getting a pay packet. We will come to that. Arunachal, now that I have got you, and it's a rare opportunity to meet someone from Arunachal, a journalist. Like, what kind of job protection do you guys have? You just said you have 100 working journalists in the state. So are they fully employed, or it's returnership or whatever?
I think, sir, the media situation, especially job security situation, all over the Southeast Asia is same. I've been to US recently, and I've been to Arab recently in IFJ programs. I saw everywhere is the same as with my place. Like sir has pointed out, nowadays sometimes I feel ashamed to be called as a journalist, especially with this after this mojo journalism, mobile journalism come up, and every working man can be a media person, and there's no ethics, there is no sense for news. So in terms of like you said, for job security, ours is, I would say, is a worse compared to the mainstream media, because we don't have a revenue source. Unlike the other bigger state like Delhi and Maharashtra or Punjab, we don't have our industries. All we have to depend on central government. So in that particular situation, journalists have to end up, you were resorting yellow journalisms or PRO kind of reporting. So that's how it affects the quality journalism.
Maybe you were trying to be very politically correct. We are not actually pushing journalists into propaganda and PR. We are actually provoking them to become blackmailers and extortionists, because we don't pay them. Like I, in a previous newspaper, I was visiting a state, and in the morning, the next morning, I had 4 so-called reporters of the same paper who showed up at my place. They found out that I'm there. And I said, I didn't know that you guys are here in a small block of Uttar Pradesh. They said, no, we are all journalists of the paper that you work for. I said, show me the card, your card, ID card. So it's on the card, very interestingly, it's a big paper. What was mentioned was they were identified as source. Just source, not even journalists, because if you mention journalists, that journalist can go and claim wage board or whatever. So you designate them as just a source, and you essentially are telling them, ठीक है, story भी करो, but go and extort all the local contractors, whoever is there, and get ads. And that is, so we are actually de facto pushing them into this. And at the same time, we talk about ethics, principles. On the ground, it's very difficult to hold your ground and be straight. What do you think, Snehashish?
Yes, Ruben, you have flagged a very crucial point which our profession, entire profession suffers. Number one, as I said, the digitization has democratized everything. And these are the people, the mojo is one side. We know that everywhere the people are coming with a mobile phone and maybe a boom are surrounding all of us whom we do not know. And what do they do? Even they are coming to the areas like press clubs, and then they are, doing some unfair means. It has become a problem for this, because the prestige of the profession is at stake. So we don't know who they are, but we cannot debar, because on one side we talk about democracy, everybody has become a content producer. So how, and then it's very difficult for the other people to distinguish who are the reporters and who are this kind of people. And they also try to collect money and all other things. So I don't know how to address. On one side, anybody has become a journalist now. Without training, that's a different issue. One can pick up skill, but there are certain do's and don'ts, certain norms, because nobody can become an advocate, nobody can become a doctor, nobody can become an engineer, but anybody can become a journalist. And this is freedom of speech and expression, because everybody has been given the right as enshrined in our constitution. So one side, it's more the merrier in the democracy. Democracy is so-called quote unquote being strengthened, but their attitude, their behavior, their misusing the term as journalist has become has surfaced. And even if people are in social media, there is no kind of fair, balanced and objective approach. I do this, I come here because I have been patronized by some people. Now of late we see that every political leader have this kind of 2-3 journalists who are there in the press conference. They try to ask questions prominently, and they ask tutored questions which will give them some kind of a lead which that particular political person wants to highlight. And there is no point of balancing taking the counter version and things like that. The basic ethics are not followed. So I don't know how to tackle the situation. In one side, more the merrier, strengthening democracy, but at the other side, it's creating a harm to the so-called journalism profession.
I think the real story is like the way the media operates. It's structured in India. It's a very, very dismal situation. Like 90% of the journalists are, as I feel, they are in the unorganized sector without any proper dignified means of livelihood. But then that is how we operate. And I feel so privileged now that I have landed up in Delhi. I live in Delhi. So obviously, though we run the risk of getting onto the wrong side of the powers that be, but at least we have some semblance of protection. We can reach out to a lawyer, we can reach out to the EGI. Hopefully, Anand and my colleagues will bail me out. But a journalist in the hinterland is defenseless. He is faceless. He is also defenseless. Like we all, Sugata, we all have, we have heard and we know about what happened to Gauri Lankesh. At least to that extent, it was very unfortunate what happened to her. But at least she was a name. What kind of security does a faceless rural reporter have, we'll say, in Karnataka?
Ruben, yeah, I mean, Gauri was a very dear friend, and she came to see me a week before she was killed. So I first want to say that she's a dear friend. But I will sort of also say that Gauri is not a typical example of a hinterland journalist, because she was extremely privileged, and she often believed in doing political activism more than the kind of journalism that Snehashish or I or he would be comfortable doing. So even when the day she was gunned down and I was asked this question, I said, I wouldn't want to talk about her journalism, because if you start looking at the headlines that were being given in a paper or the language that was being used, I would be very embarrassed as a journalist. So I don't think Gauri is a typical example of a hinterland journalist. But we also have to be extremely careful that, not to sort of discount the kind of risks that she took or whatever. She was brave, but then I think, the usual checks and balances of journalism would have saved her.
Okay, but
that's the thing. Right. So there is absolutely no security for, as you were right, in the rural hinterland. See, I don't think the students here should go out of this room thinking that there are only corrupt people there. They're extraordinarily talented people, and I worked with some of the most talented people. This person whom I mentioned earlier was with me in one of the television channels, and he just got the Lokayukta to resign, a former Supreme Court judge, because his son was very, very corrupt. So there are lots of such examples that one can cite, but they are now, under political patronage. You also have to look, EGI especially, Anant and EGI also has to look at how media ownership has changed in the last 10 years. Who owns regional media? Nobody is interested in buying English newspapers or English channels. But look at the number of regional channels that have proliferated.
You have touched upon a great point,
Yeah.
and we are running out of time.
Yeah.
I've just
so
couple
that
of
is,
minutes.
I'll probably
Yeah.
stop at that. That is the clue. Most politicians want a voice, a propaganda thing, and and it's become easy. You don't need a satellite connection these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
So these things are happening.
You have hit the
Sumesh.
bullseye. Poor pay, lack of protection, and another thing, like we sitting in Delhi or in other cities, big cities, we tend to think that it is only us or here where the space for free press freedom is shrinking.
Ruben, one other point, the larger issue probably that the EGI can take up is, see, cross-media holdings have never been challenged in India. See, it came up under the Congress and they also pushed it under the carpet. It never came up under this regime. So that is a huge
Get your
issue,
point.
right?
Sumit, to wrap up quickly, like I genuinely feel that it's whatever that is happening to press freedom in Delhi or Bombay, it's far more acute in the hinterland. Like it's not only the government of India which is the villain, it's the regional satraps are possibly as villainous. So what's your take?
See, I always say is that we are more vulnerable because the system, the Indian caste system is very strong in the hinterland, and it is so brutal to the everybody who raises a voice against that status quo. And when I talk about the community journalists, it is a challenge to the community journalists because they are working on the ground. They don't have that kind of ecosystem. They don't have that ID cards of Aaj Tak or Hindustan Times or Times of India. They might have a small YouTube channel, the small Facebook page or a WhatsApp group, reporting particular issues on a very caste atrocities case. So that becomes a huge, risky for them because some of the community journalists are also facing, physical violences while they are, reporting, because I've been into different areas and I've been, covering those related issues. And even I also faces some kind of, physical, threats, because once I was there in Gujarat, I was covering a story, election coverage story, and there was a, Dalits people were not allowed to cremate their bodies in the, that cremation center. So I was covering that particular issue, and some of the people were there and they, started shouting on me and they were about to attack on me. So that becomes a challenge for a person like me who's from community and who is exposed to the caste identity, because they know your caste, they know who you are, where you belong. So they have that kind of, caste, hegemony in their mind, that structure is in their mind, that they don't treat you equal. They don't want to treat you equal, and sometimes they become very aggressive also to you. And even, while you're covering such stories and you're, dealing with the police system, you're dealing with the government official, they don't take you seriously. So that's a challenge to the community journalists.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time. They have been frantically gesturing. We can go on and on, but the takeaway from this is, while we talk about Indian media, we should not lose sight of the actual foot soldiers. We are not the foot soldiers. We are living in the comfort of the cities. We have some semblance of protection. The foot soldiers are the journalists in the hinterland with no pay, no protection, and perpetually under political pressure. So my sympathies lie with them. I think, sir, we'll have to wrap up, but I can take just 2 questions if you... 30 seconds. Just quickly, please. Yeah.
My name is Arunachal. I had been a long journey with mainstream media, with Indian Express and Hindu. I could not, stop myself saying something on this issue because I worked in the rural areas of India across from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and Gujarat to Nagaland. I have worked with the rural correspondent, photographers and everybody. So the thing is, only one point, I think all the points have been touched. During the COVID, we lost not less than 300 journalists in the rural level. but not a single name appeared on any mainstream media.
Get your point. Absolutely. Very correct. Very correct.
And people called me up in Mumbai and they said, Dada, we don't have Russian.
Yeah.
We don't have anything.
Very
I get a
correct.
goosebump.
Absolutely. Your point taken. Absolutely. Yes, Mr. Dal.
Small elephant in the room. I so empathize with you when you call them community journalists. That is journalists as community. I was just wondering about a poor boy from Kerala, a Muslim, who was arrested on the thesis that he was possibly going to cover up for it, and he was in jail for half of his career, you can say. Would it be different for these two communities, the Dalits and the Muslims? Long ago, the Second Press Commission, they conducted a survey on the profile of the Indian journalist. Mr. M.V. Desai ordered it. I was in the team with Seema and others who conducted that survey. There were, of course, no Dalits. There were hardly any Muslims in command. But question was, caste, communalism are potent issues that the media suffers itself from, and
This is something we have to address.
yeah,
And-
we have to address. We have to take cognizance of the fact.
Yes,
The
absolutely.
Hindustan Times caters to its community. It's a
get
community
it. I
paper.
get your point. Yeah, you wanted to.
Sir, I'm going to talk something really breaking fast. I'm from Gujarat, and as far as beyond metro journalism is concerned, you guys will be shocked to know that the smallest of the small journalists is a crorepati in Gujarat.
I should relocate.
Please. A professional journalist is only based on his salary.
Your point has been made.
That's all.
We have accepted.
That's all.
Yeah, just give it to him. Just one last, and that's it.
So thank you very much. My question is that if the journalist cannot be identified, as most of you have said, they are on, Twitter, they are on Facebook, they are on YouTube. Why can't the CSR funding and a cap funding, it's not a huge funding, the funding of media should be identified as CSR. The Editor Guild is one of a leading organization. If we push up the matter, that CSR funding can be given to the
Point taken.
recognized.
Point taken, and this is definitely a food for thought. Yeah. So, but anyway, I would.
There has to be a cap. Absolutely right. Because it has to be a funding by drizzle, not by the burst of snow.
But I would like to believe.
Like
Yeah.
NPSF has gone through a lot because they funded smaller.
Yeah. I hope. that
IPO can be also given.
These are food for thought, and I would hope that the EGI will take this up, and
No,
we will
media
not lose sight of our actual, real, true foot soldiers. Thank you all. We have really run out of time. Thank you.